Good morning. It's nice to see people who were here last year as well. We had a very nice first conference last year, and I hope this one is going to be as much fun and with as many opportunities for networking as we had last time. And that was really what I think stayed with most of us, the impression. We enjoyed ourselves, but we most of all enjoyed speaking to people from other countries and finding out what they were doing in the field of criminology. This is not forensics, and it's not really criminalistics, but it is a topic that interests many criminologists. It's one that is difficult to pin down, cybercrime, because it seems to grow exponentially in a continually increasing number of directions. So when I began to think about my talk here, I was particularly interested in finding out about types of cybercrime, as well as the steps that are being taken to deal with it, with an Australian focus, no doubt, because that's from where I hail. I interviewed a number of law enforcement personnel and found that while they were happy to discuss cybercrime and all the incidents of cybercriminals, they were most reluctant to discuss their own involvement and their strategies for identifying or even apprehending criminals. It's understandable in the circumstances. They don't want to let the bad guys know how the good guys are going to catch them. But it means that I have to skirt around some of the details and we'll be discussing the incidents rather than their resolution. I presume we have no law enforcement people here who are going to jump up and down. Okay. A recent example of the way in which unscrupulous individuals are capitalizing on the advantages of the internet is the proliferation of webcam footage available on a hacking website in Russia. It shows live feeds from private homes and businesses in countries all around the world and is reportedly registered in an offshore territory administered by Australia. That's as close as I could get to finding out the actual roots of the problem. The footage available on the internet is taken from surveillance cameras installed by members of the public in their homes as well as in their businesses, and includes footage from nanny cams, baby monitors, surveillance cameras in restaurants and other public places. And the reason that these supposedly private webcam installations are able to be accessed so freely is that apparently many people who purchase the devices are quite happy to leave them with the default password that comes with the device. And of course, the criminals can also find the default password. So with this password, they're able to access the webcams and use it to observe whatever and wherever they choose. Law enforcement advice: change the password immediately you install such a device. Then again, in many instances, cybercrime is an extension of traditional crime, where criminals see a way to maximize their rewards and minimize their risk of discovery. For instance, stalking, cyberbullying, harassment, or if you're American, harassment, fraud, all these are now harder to solve. The internet allows offenders anonymity, and sometimes those offenders have access to better technology than law enforcement. They make more money, and also they use the best means to hide themselves. In addition, one of the members of the unit in Australia told me they work at their craft 24/7 and we're restricted to shifts. So obviously they have a better chance to put their case across than law enforcement do. Online dating, used widely by people of all ages, is a minefield for unsuspecting victims. Scammers hide their true identity and create fake profiles on the internet dating sites. Now, I don't know whether any of you are on online dating. If you are, I suggest you look very carefully at the people with whom you communicate. Once they've made contact with a victim, they will intensify the emotional content of their messages, and they're likely to score cash, expensive gifts, or perhaps even more valuable, personal details of the victim. So in the case of Australia, these scammers will often operate from other countries, all the while duping their victims into believing that they are located in Australia. A member of the Queensland Fraud and Cybercrime Unit explained to me that Australia and Queensland are victim rich, in that they represent a society that has good disposable incomes and easy access to the internet. In fact, we have a larger victim than offender database. And when you think about it, that shows you how serious the problem is in one country in particular. Romance scams investment scams, inheritance scams. They're also responsible for a larger victim base. Romance scams in particular are cleverly worked to take advantage of the most vulnerable members of society. People who might recently have lost a spouse or partner, seniors with disposable incomes, divorcees. Often lonely and desperate for company, they'll meet someone online who is kind, sympathetic, loving, shows an interest in them, ask them about their personal problems, not realizing that they are in fact dealing with a carefully composed team of people who take it in turns to make contact with the victim, all the while keeping him or her assured of their affection. And then slowly the appeals for cash enter the picture. Perhaps something small, like, oh, I just need enough to pay for my Wi-Fi this month because my salary is late and I don't want to lose contact with you. And that might be the first appeal that comes forward. The seeds are sown. And eventually, the stage is reached where the victim either sends enough money for the new lover or friend to travel to the victim's destination, or sometimes persuaded to make the trip to the criminal's destination. It's a fairly common scenario, and it's not gender specific. It happens just as often to men as it does to women, and originally emanating from West African nations, but increasingly being found in Saudi Arabia, Indonesia, different Asian sources, almost worldwide. Law enforcers from the cybercrime and fraud units keep a watch when large sums of money leave the country to specific destinations, and often they can halt the process before everything is lost. But I was told of one case where an elderly woman, recently widowed, was targeted, with the result that she sent frequent bank transfers to help her new romance before being asked to travel to the criminal's country where she was going to be married to her new friend. Law enforcement discovered the scam, and they were about to make contact with the woman and warn her of the dangers when she left almost immediately, didn't even tell her family. That case had tragic consequences, as she was found dead the day after her arrival at the new country, having signed over all her assets. And that's only one example of the number of romance scams that we see increasing. So where do the scammers and the fraudsters obtain their information? It's not as difficult as we might think. There are a number of different ways for fraudulent gangs to target their victims. Contact lists can be purchased online, lists containing hundreds of thousands of email addresses. And we've all encountered incidents where we've received marketing communications from companies we've never had communication with, and these things come direct to our personal email accounts. Phishing scams like this will generate responses. They're often sent out in large numbers to random email addresses, and when a response is received, it becomes apparent that there is someone there, and that name and email address are immediately added to the list. It happens too then that the victims find themselves victimized again by other groups. These criminals like to add a sense of urgency to their messages. Please update your user ID and password or you will lose access to your internet account. That's a frequent one that comes to my emails. Or, please, the bank is updating its records. Log into your account with your user ID and password immediately on receipt of this email. How many of you received an email like that? Yep, I have. Several of them, yeah. And they come to university email and they tell us our security is very strong, and yet they keep arriving, even from banks I've never dealt with in my life. So we know that the scammers are out there. And this sense of urgency, by telling us that if we don't respond, we're going to lose something, is usually what makes victims somewhere send a response to that email. Another point brought home by a member of the Fraud and Cybercrime Unit was that the internet also removes the censors from the scenarios. And I don't mean the censors who ban things, but the censors that we use to see things. When we meet someone on the street and a business deal is proposed, we can see the other party. We can observe their body language, and we can make an educated guess as to the credibility of the deal. However, on the internet, we have nothing but an email or a Facebook message. No chance to use any of our senses or to make a judgment call. Child protection is an area where the internet has made it much easier for criminals to ply their trade. In Queensland, we have Task Force Argus, which takes responsibility for investigating online child exploitation and abuse. And in 2012, detectives from Task Force Argus raided the Logan home of a security guard and exposed a global pornography ring stretching to more than 15 countries and involving hundreds of alleged pedophiles. A number of young children were identified and rescued by law enforcement. It's common practice, I'm sure you know, for pedophiles to groom and chat to young people or teenagers online, pretending to be someone of their own age. And the message from law enforcement here is to be aware of the contacts communicating with children. And the Australian Federal Police also have a child protection organisation, and it's called Child Protection Operations, and they deal with the multi-jurisdictional and international child sex exploitation issues. Their links include international law enforcement agencies, Interpol, and a number of government and non-government organisations. Social networking, something most of us are familiar with, and there is apparently no one age group more at risk than any other. I would have thought it was young people, but according to law, no, everyone is at risk. When I was speaking to a member again of the Fraud and Cybercrime Unit in Queensland, he described some of the bullying and immoral behaviour that takes place on sites such as Facebook. You won't believe it, he said. Put people in front of a Facebook site, and from the way they behave, you wouldn't believe they are the same people. According to him, it's the sense, again, of anonymity offered by the internet, and also the fact that there is no accountability. The Australian Commonwealth Government's Cyber Safety Plan focuses on the broader social and personal risks associated with the use of computers and the internet and the protection of children online. The Commonwealth's Cyber Security Strategy outlines the vision for a secure, resilient, and trusted cyber environment and provides a framework to better address threats to computer systems and data, etc. I saw on the news this morning the headlines. They've discovered a new bug, a new computer bug, apparently a Russian one. No more details yet, but it's there. Their national plan, detailed on their website, includes educating the community to protect themselves, partnering with industry to tackle the shared problems of cybercrime, fostering an intelligence-led approach and information sharing, improving the capacity and capability of government agencies, particularly law enforcement, to address cybercrime, improving international engagement on cybercrime, and contributing to global efforts to combat cybercrime and ensuring an effective criminal justice framework. One of the most recent strategies for combating cybercrime in Australia is a new national policing initiative. It's the Commonwealth, state and territory governments, and it's called the Australian Cybercrime Online Reporting Network, commonly known as ACORN. Believing that underreporting of online criminal activity is a major reason for so much of it going unsolved, ACORN allows members of the public to report all aspects of online criminal activity, and it also informs the public about types of cybercrime, such as online trading matters, identity theft, and scams. Who would have thought that we would be facing such an onslaught of hitherto unknown dangers simply by adopting new devices, such as computers and smartphones? And to get academic for a moment, I go back to Marshall McLuhan and his belief that the medium is the message, and that is still, I think, my favorite idea in communications. And then we have Thorstein Veblen's theory of technological determinism. And that's the one that tells us that society's technology drives the development of our social structure and cultural values. As technology changes, so do our cultural habits and values. We've seen how habits changed with the introduction of television. People used to have dinner around the table. They used to talk to each other. They used to discuss what had happened during the day. Suddenly television came on the scene and people eat on trays in front of their laps watching the television. That was a major discussion and a major change. Now, nowhere is that theory more proved than in the case of the internet. We used to say, oh, it's in the paper, it must be true. Then we said, oh, it's on television, it must be true. Now we say, oh, it's on the internet, it must be true. As criminologists, we are well aware of the folly of believing that particular statement. More and more devices are coming onto the market today. What the public wants, the public gets. And what we mostly want is something that just plug and play. We are often oblivious to the inherent dangers of the internet or even of technology itself. Smartphones, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth. Our mobile phones are becoming mobile computers. We email on them. We conduct our banking on them. We are literally moving targets. Organizations like Apple and Microsoft are constantly introducing patches to update their vulnerable areas or backdoors. But we don't see many corrective options on Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. The more we use these devices, the more we social network on them, the more likely we are to become targets for future crime. Internet banking frauds are a constant source of worry, and I know somebody's talking later in this seminar about ID theft. Criminals have many ways of gaining access to your account and transferring money. When Australia still used the magnetic strip on the back of credit cards, we were viewed as the major target of vandals. They would travel to the country specifically to take advantage of that magnetic strip in order to clone cards and create new bank cards. Now that we have advanced to the use of chips in credit cards, most personal fraud originates offshore. So far as net banking is concerned, people can get banking details from anywhere, but we do have some security. The bank has your bank account name, you have your user ID and password, so you are reasonably safe, with your real risks coming from a compromised computer, with Trojan or other malware capturing your data. Or, of course, if you respond to one of those phishing emails purporting to be from your bank. The information obtained in this way can be used immediately, or it can be stored in a data bank for future use. And here again, the Australian Federal Police's digital forensics is able to analyze data recovered from computers, electronic devices, and other digital sources. A recent article in Forbes magazine revealed that Facebook has paid out more than $300,000 to hackers to find bugs in their system and help correct them. But Google went one better, paying out a reported $410,000 to hackers prepared to highlight bugs in their system. And this custom of paying hackers to practice their profession for legal reasons is not uncommon. With the old adage still applying, it takes a thief to catch a thief. And you can actually find a hacker online if you look. They advertise their wares quite freely. The global aspect of cybercrime allows criminals to get away by simply being out of reach of the police. In some instances, police can apply for extradition, and some countries are happy to assist. However, in others, there is no going forward, and pleas for extradition receive no response. An article in the Daily Mail Australia reports that a town in Romania, allegedly known as the global hub of cybercrime, it has a population of only 127,000 people, has more than 100 cybercrime gangs operating. I would give you the name, but I can't pronounce it. One reported scam is goods being offered for sale on Craigslist or eBay, with the buyer in the UK making payment to a British bank account. A member of the gang then withdraws the money and takes it to Romania. And police have made arrests, but reportedly have only scratched the surface of the problem. The Australian Institute of Criminology has also published many documents and articles relating to cybercrime. They report that results of a survey conducted in 2010, covering 1,436 small businesses, found that 96% owned a computer, 94% were connected to the internet, 60% had a website, 43% took orders for products and services online, and 53% received payments online. This information was provided, by the way, by Census Pty Limited. A law enforcement member told me that part of the problem is that many small businesses still run computers with Word XP. And of course, the problem is that no patches are provided for that system, so they are ripe for exploitation. The AIC lists the top security tools used by Australian businesses to combat cybercrime: antivirus software, firewall, anti-spam, and anti-spyware. Antivirus is the most common with small, medium, and large businesses. And it's unfortunate that the greatest advantage of the internet, its global reach, also poses its greatest threat. Almost anyone in the country can access a computer in almost any other country, publish false information relating to trade or investment, spread child pornography. And the difficulty arises as to not only how to prosecute, but where to prosecute. The issue arose with Australia's first recorded internet defamation case, Dow Jones and Company Inc. versus Gutnick, where Dow Jones stated that some of Gutnick's business dealers with religious charities raised uncomfortable questions. Jeffrey Robertson QC appeared for Dow Jones, but the justices decided that Gutnick had the right to sue in the place in which he was best known and where the damage to his reputation occurred. The High Court found that defamation did not occur at the time of publishing, but at the time it was downloaded, a ruling which effectively gave defamation plaintiffs in Australia the right to sue for internet defamation against any defendant, no matter where their location. Of course, the problem here is that even though a plaintiff may successfully sue for defamation in another country, there's no guarantee that any damages awarded will ever be paid. As I mentioned at the start of this address, officers of law enforcement are understandably reluctant to disclose their modus operandi when dealing with various crimes, or even their involvement with various government and non-government bodies. However, they do not dispute the fact that cybercrime in Australia is on the increase, and that a concerted effort by all parties concerned, including the public, is necessary if it is to be eliminated or even controlled. We as criminologists have our part to play. The more we research and reveal instances of cybercrime, the more public awareness we will create, and perhaps the number of perpetrators will eventually overtake the number of victims. Thank you.